Assalamu alaikum dear students, welcome to a new video of mine with a new lecture on a new topic, and today's new topic is Victorian novel. It is a very popular kind of a topic. Any person who is interested in English literature knows about it and knows about the significance of it. Before going into details, what are the chief characteristics of Victorian novel? Let's have an introduction to this topic. It is said that Victorian age is remembered for its novel and its novelists, because Victorian age produced a long list of galaxy of star novelists. In other words, Victorian age produced great novelists in the history of English literature. The special thing about Victorian novel is this, that not only we have great male novelists in this age, but at the same time we have great female novelists. Not only the male novelists are great, but equally great are the female novelists. This rarely happens in any other age in the history of English novel as well as in the history of English literature. There is a long list of these novelists, and best among them are: number one is Charles Dickens, number two is William Makepeace Thackeray, number three is Thomas Hardy, and then there is the list of female novelists. In female novelists, number one is Emily Bronte, number two is Charlotte Bronte, number three is George Eliot, and number four is Mrs. Gaskell. All of them, they contributed a lot towards the development of English novel in this age by producing great kinds of novels. Let's discuss them one by one in detail and discuss also their contribution to English novel. So first of all, we are going to discuss Mr. Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens is one of the important and surely the greatest novelists of this age. Some of the critics are of the view that Charles Dickens is not only the greatest novelist of Victorian age, but at the same time, he is the greatest novelist of entire range of English literature. He produced a long list of novels, but his best known novels are Great Expectations, David Copperfield, Oliver Twist, Nicholas Nickleby, and many others. But these are the best known novels by Charles Dickens. Let's discuss some of the characteristics of the novels of Charles Dickens. First and the foremost characteristic of the novels of Charles Dickens is humor. It is said that Charles Dickens is a natural humorist. He is a humorist right from his birth. In other words, he carried his sense of humor right from his birth. Naturally, he was humorist. So there is a strong note of humor running through all the novels of Charles Dickens. His all novels reflect this element. Every novel, every chapter of the novel, every page of the novel, every line of the novel, even every word and alphabet of the novel is reflective of the humor of Mr. Charles Dickens. There are multiple forms of, different forms of humor found in the novels of Charles Dickens. First important form of humor that is found in the novels of Charles Dickens is humor in characterization. For example, he is in the habit of introducing his characters in a funny manner, in a humorous manner. For example, he describes the appearances of his characters at the time of their introduction in a funny manner, in a humorous manner. This is one of the forms of humor that is found in the novels of Charles Dickens. Then second important form of humor that is found in the novels of Charles Dickens is situational humor or humor of situation. Humor of situation is the type of humor which arises out of situation, which arises out of the circumstances. It does not arise out of the dialogue, it does not arise out of the speech of characters, rather it arises out of a funny situation without, the help of dialogue, right? So this type of humor exists abundantly in the novels of Charles Dickens. For example, humor of situation example is when Pip at the time of dinner in the novel Great Expectations is criticized by different people around the people around the dinner table. At that time, his brother-in-law, Mr. Joe, pours more gravy into his plate as a compensation for that criticism. So that is an example of humor of situation, right? So this is another important form of humor found in the novels of Charles Dickens. Then there is also caricaturism found in the novels of Charles Dickens, which is another form of humor. He twists different aspects of the physical appearances of his characters. He twists the speeches of certain characters, and in this way, through that, he tries to create humor. So this caricaturism is the next important form of humor found in the novels of Charles Dickens. So humor is one of the important aspects of the novels of Charles Dickens. One of the important qualities of the humor of Charles Dickens is that it is very natural kind of a humor. Natural in the sense that Charles Dickens doesn't seem to make any effort to create humor in the pages of his novel. Rather, he seems to be creating his humor effortlessly, without any effort, naturally, right? This is one of the important qualities of his humor. Second important quality of his humor is consistency. His humor is consistent. He is humorous right from the word go. Right from the start of his novel till the end of his novel, right? He never stops being humorous. In fact, some of the critics are of the view that he looks at life with the lens of humor. Even if he is talking about the most serious themes, somber themes related to life, still he would be highly humorous in the world of his novels. So humor is something that is not casual, that is not sporadic, that does not happen with breaks in the novels of Charles Dickens. It happens consistently in the novels of Charles Dickens. So this is the next important speciality of the humor of Charles Dickens. Next important characteristic of the humor of Charles Dickens is spontaneous. It is highly spontaneous and natural kind of a humor. Spontaneous means that there is effortlessness in his humor. He does not use his intellectual force or his creative force by creating his humor forcibly. Rather, he creates his humor in a spontaneous manner, in a natural manner, without any intellectual labor, without any hard work, without any force. So this is the next important aspect of his humor. Next important characteristic of the novels of Charles Dickens is characterization. If you look at the characterization of the novels of Charles Dickens, then you will come to know that Charles Dickens depicts variety of characters. So this is one of the important qualities of the characterization of Charles Dickens, that there is immense variety as far as his characterization is concerned. He creates all sorts of characters belonging to different walks of life. His characters are almost from all the classes of the society. So this is one of the important qualities of his characterization, that is variety. Next important characteristic of his characterization is that he seems to be an expert in the depiction of child psychology. He seems to be a child psychologist whenever it comes to the depiction of the psychology of his child characters, right? For example, there is the novel Great Expectations, there is the novel David Copperfield, there is the novel Oliver Twist. In all these novels, he talks about children, he talks about young protagonists, right? For example, in Great Expectation, there is the character of Pip, right? He talks about the psychology of Pip, he depicts the nature of Pip, he depicts the nature of a child, that how a child behaves whenever he is threatened by a convict or by a criminal, right? He depicts that psychology truly. His depiction of psychology is so truthful, so natural, so convincing that even a general child psychologist in the field of the profession of medicine can envy it. So this is one of the important characteristic of his characterization, that he is expert in the depiction of child psychology. Next important characteristic of his characterization is his characters are mostly from the middle classes of the society and the lower classes of the society. He most of the time focuses upon the lower classes of the society, the poorer classes of the society, which is why the favorite most theme of Charles Dickens' novels is poor boy making good in life. In other words, he always shows a poor boy as protagonist who is making financial progress in life. Pip in Great Expectations, David Copperfield in David Copperfield, and Oliver Twist, a boy in Oliver Twist, all of them are poor boys who try to make effort to make progress in life, to make financial progress in life, right? So this is one of the important characteristic of the novels of Charles Dickens, that he always depicts poorer classes of the society, the middle classes of the society. He rarely focuses upon the upper classes of the society, the elite classes of the society. If elite classes are depicted by him as characters in the world of his novels, then they are depicted by him in relation to lower classes of the society. In other words, if elite characters they have any significance in the pages of the novels of Charles Dickens, they have this significance because they have something to do with the lower classes of the society. They have something to do with the characters of the lower classes of the society. So this is one of the important characteristic of the novels of Charles Dickens. And there is another important aspect to his characterization, is that his characterization is most of the time flat in nature. It is not round in nature. His characters are mostly flat in nature and they lack roundness in them. In other words, his characters do not develop either emotionally or psychologically or mentally during the course of the time in the story of his novels. Such characters are called flat characters. And on the other hand, round characters are those which develop either emotionally or psychologically or mentally with the passage of time as the story progresses in a novel. Such sort of characters, round characters, are rarely to be seen in the novels of Charles Dickens, which is why majority of his characters lack depth, either emotional depth or psychological depth. His characters are not great vertically, but his characters are great horizontally. His characterization is not great depth wise, but breadth wise his characterization is great one, because he talks about variety of human beings. He talks about variety of characters in the world of his novels. They may lack depth, psychological depth or emotional depth, but we do have God's plenty in the world of his novels. So this is one of the important characteristic of the novels of Charles Dickens. Last but not the least aspect of the novels of Charles Dickens is themes of the novels of Charles Dickens. As I told you previously, that one of the chiefest qualities of the novels of Charles Dickens is that it depicts themes belonging to the lower classes of the society. And the favorite most theme of Charles Dickens is poor boy making good in life. This is the theme of Pip. This is the theme of some of the other novels, right? And the main theme of the novel Great Expectations is poor boy making good in life. Along with that, the main theme is corrupting influence of money upon human nature. That how human nature is spoiled by the arrival of money in the life of characters, in the life of human beings. That human nature is corrupted, its purity is corrupted by the negative impact of money. Before money, Pip had been an excellent human being, a beautiful human being. He was warm-hearted, he was friendly, he was in a positive way informal towards his relatives and the people around him. But the moment he becomes rich and affluent, then he becomes snobbish and class conscious and all that. So Pip it becomes, and develops some of the negative qualities under the negative impact of money. So this is another important aspect of the novels of Charles Dickens, that is themes. There is another important thing related to themes. Most of the time, the themes of Charles Dickens novels are somber one, dark one, unpleasant one. Most of the time, it focuses upon such themes that relate to the tragic aspects of life, the darker aspects of life. Thanks to a sense of humor, which brightens up the gloomy atmosphere which is otherwise created by his themes. So this is another important characteristic of the novels of Charles Dickens, which is his themes. Next important novelist is William Makepeace Thackeray. He is also one of the senior novelists of the age. He also, like Charles Dickens, belongs to the earlier part of Victorian age. But he is best remembered for his novel called Vanity Fair. Right? This is the only best novel produced by this man. Rest of the novels are also there by William Makepeace Thackeray, but they are not as great as is Vanity Fair. So William Makepeace Thackeray is more remembered for Vanity Fair than any other novel. Let's discuss the main characteristics of this novel. One of the main characteristics of this novel is that it depicts the life of its protagonist, that is Becky Sharp. Becky Sharp is the central figure. She is the most important character around which the entire story is woven by William Makepeace Thackeray. And William Makepeace Thackeray shows that how Becky Sharp struggles hard to reach the elite class of the society, the upper class of the society. Right? So how Becky Sharp reaches the upper class of the society, how he struggles hard, this is the basic story of this particular novel. While talking about the character of Becky Sharp, one of the critics said that Becky Sharp is a strange kind of a character with the strange mixture of certain qualities. She is the mixture of vice and brilliance and foolishness and virtue and attractiveness. All these qualities are there in the character of Becky Sharp. She is at one time she seems to have vice, at another time she seems to be brilliant, another time she seems to be foolish, another time she seems to be having virtue, another time she seems to be a very attractive type of a human being, an attractive kind of a lady. So these are the strange, mixture of qualities that is there reflected by the character of Becky Sharp. Then William Makepeace Thackeray also depicts Victorian society. He also condemns the drawback of Victorian society. For example, he criticizes the class consciousness of Victorian society, the snobbery of Victorian society, which is the byproduct of the financial strength of Victorian society, which was going up and up with the passage of time as a result of industrial revolution that was taking place in this particular age. So he criticizes the snobbish attitude of the Victorian society, the class conscious attitude of the Victorian society. The next important aspect of the novels of this man, William Makepeace Thackeray, is pessimism, right? Like rest of the novelists in Victorian age, like rest of the writers in Victorian age, William Makepeace Thackeray also came under the influence of pessimism of Victorian culture, pessimism of Victorian society, right? This pessimism of Victorian society was due to the conflict between science and religion, and this also impacted the mind and heart of William Makepeace Thackeray. As a result of that, William Makepeace Thackeray ends the novel Vanity Fair on a pessimistic note. He says that which of us is happy in this world? Which of us has his desire, or after having it is satisfied? In other words, in simpler words, nobody is happy in this world. Even the person who has all his desires fulfilled in this world is not happy, because world is like this. This is how it behaves. No one can be happy in this world, right? So this is how he ends this novel, on a pessimistic note. So these are some of the characteristics of the novels of William Makepeace Thackeray, one of the important novelists of Victorian age. Next important male novelist of Victorian age is Thomas Hardy. You might have listened to the name of Thomas Hardy, and Thomas Hardy produced some of the best tragedies in the field of novel in this age. He is regarded to be one of the best tragedy writers in the history of English literature. Surely he is the best tragedy writer in the field of English novel. He produced a long list of novels. Number 1 is Tess of the D'Urbervilles. Number 2 is Mayor of the Casterbridge. Number 3 is Far from Madding Crowd. And number 5 is Return of the Native. These are the best known novels of Thomas Hardy. Let's discuss the features of these novels. First important characteristic of these novels is element of fate. Thomas Hardy believes that human beings are puppets in the hands of fate. We do not do anything on our own. We do not run our life with our sweet will. Rather, we are already controlled by fate. Whatever we do in this world, in this life, is already written in the book of fate. So we are merely in the hands of fate. We are puppets in the hands of fate. There are different forms of fate in which it appears in the novels of Thomas Hardy. Number 1 form of fate is chance. Number 2 is nature. Number 3 is character weakness. Number 4 is coincidence. Right? Chance happens in the life of Tess of the D'Urbervilles. Tess, one of the important characters in the novel Tess of the D'Urbervilles, she's the protagonist of that novel. Her life is totally ruined by the chance happenings that take place in the life of Tess of the D'Urbervilles. And then there is element of nature, which is another form of fate. And fate appears in the form of nature and destroy the life of the characters of Thomas Hardy. For example, the life of Mayor of Casterbridge, Henchard, is destroyed by nature. Tess' life is to some extent negatively affected by nature when she was working as agricultural laborer in Flintcomb Ash in the novel Tess of the D'Urbervilles. And then next important aspect of fate in which it appears is character weakness. For example, Jude the Obscure is one of the novels of Thomas Hardy, and in this novel Thomas Hardy talks about the character Jude, and Thomas Hardy tells us that the character weakness of Jude's character is that he is sexually excited kind of a person. He had a sexual weakness in his personality. He is driven by a sexual passion, and because of which many difficulties come in his life, because of which many disasters happen in his life, and he suffers because of this weakness. So by chance, naturally he possessed this weakness due to which he suffers. So this is another important form of fate in which it appears in the novels of Thomas Hardy. Next is coincidence. Coincidence means happening of two events at the one and the same time. Two different events at the one and the same time that are somehow related to each other, right? So this also happens in the novels of Thomas Hardy. Thomas Hardy's characters suffer and die a tragic death because of the element of coincidence, which is one of the forms of fate. The next important form of characteristic of the novels of Thomas Hardy is the element of pessimism. If you read the novels of Thomas Hardy, then you'll feel that there is a strong note of pessimism running through all the novels of Thomas Hardy, right? His novel Tess of the D'Urbervilles, his novel Mayor of the Casterbridge, Far from Madding Crowd, Jude the Obscure, all are full of pessimism. It is believed that Hardy is a pessimist through and through. He looks at life with a tragic lens, with a lens of pessimism. What he sees is negativity and negativity and negativity in life, and which is why he depicts the negativity in the world of his novels. He depicts only the darker side of life, the unpleasant side of life, and ignores the brighter side of life. So this is another important aspect of the novels of Thomas Hardy. Next is characterization. Most of these characters are taken from the middle classes of the society and the lower classes of the society. Most of his characters are peasants, farmers, belong to the farming profession or the profession of peasantry. For example, Tess is a peasant girl. She works on the lands of somebody else, some landlord, and in this way she get on with life, right? So Henchard is also a farmer, and certain other characters are also farmers. So farming is one of the professions of his characters, and in this way his characters are most of the time taken from the lower classes of the society. No doubt his characters are also from the upper classes of the society, but mostly they are related to the lower classes of the society. If upper class characters are there in his novels, they are in relation to the characters who belong to the lower classes of the society. So this is another important aspect of the novels of Thomas Hardy. Emily Bronte is one of the best novelists produced by Victorian age. She wrote only one novel, and that is Wuthering Heights. The very name, the very word wuthering tells us the nature of this novel. That it would be a very fierce kind of a novel, it would be a very emotionally disturbing kind of a novel. It is indicated by the word wuthering in the title of the novel. Let's discuss the characteristics of this novel. The main theme of this novel is love. There are two important characters in this novel. Number one is Catherine, number two is Heathcliff. Both of them love each other, but unfortunately, because of the circumstances, they could not get married to each other. As a result of that, they suffer in their life. So this is one of the important aspects of this novel, that is theme of love. Then there is the sub-theme of revenge. Theme of revenge is also there, but this theme of revenge is related to the theme of love as well. This theme of revenge is reflected through the character of Heathcliff, who is the male protagonist of this particular novel, the hero of this particular novel, right? He takes revenge upon those people who mistreated him, badly treated him when he was a kid, when he was a poor person. And when he becomes rich, he takes revenge upon them. And then next important aspect of this particular novel is mysticism. Mysticism is traveling from apparent reality to actual reality, to feel one with the knower and the known, feeling of one by the knower and the known. This is called mysticism, right? This element of mysticism is reflected by many things in this particular novel. So specifically, two important things. Number one is dialogue. Number two is the situation, the scene in which Emily Bronte handles the voice of dead Catherine calling after her lover Heathcliff. She shows that, in that scene, she shows that Catherine is dead and she is calling the name of Heathcliff from her grave. And Heathcliff listens to it and comes towards her grave. The way she handles it in a convincing manner, in a truthful manner, is one of the examples of mysticism of this particular novel. Then mysticism is also there in the dialogues of this particular novel. For example, one of the famous dialogues of this novel is the dialogue which is spoken by Catherine about Heathcliff to her governess, Nellie. Nellie is the name of a governess. She says to Nellie, I quote, "Nellie, I am Heathcliff. If all else perished and he remained, I should still continue to be. And if all else remained and he were annihilated, the universe would turn to a mighty stranger and I should not seem the part of it." This is what Catherine, the female protagonist, says about Heathcliff, the male protagonist, about her lover. That if this world has any meaning in her eyes, it is having this meaning because Heathcliff lives in this world. If Heathcliff is not there, even if the entire world exists in a beautiful way, still it would become meaningless for me and I would be a stranger in this world. So this is called mysticism. You can put it in simple way. Means Catherine is feeling one with Heathcliff. She says that I am Heathcliff. Right? It reminds me Baba Bulle Shah, who says, "Ranja Ranja kardi, me ape ranja hui. Ranja akho sakhyo, heer na kave koi." It also reminds me, this dialogue of Kathy also reminds me of one of the Urdu couplets which says, "अच्छा खासा बैठे बैठे गुम हो जाता हूं, मैं अब अक्सर मैं नहीं रहता तुम हो जाता हूं." So this is called mysticism, to feel one with the object that you love. Right? So this is how Catherine feels for her lover Heathcliff. This is an example of mysticism. While talking about the mysticism of Emily Bronte, one of the critics, Chew, his name is Chew, he says that there is no evidence that Emily Bronte was read in the literature of mysticism, but there is equally no doubt that she was a mystic. Then the sister of Emily Bronte, which is Charlotte Bronte, also refers to the mysticism of her sister in her novel Shirley. Right? Then the poetry of the scant amount of poetry also reflects the mysticism of Emily Bronte. So this is another important aspect of the novels of Emily Bronte, the only novel of Emily Bronte, Wuthering Heights. The next important aspect of the novel of Emily Bronte is revolt against tradition. In this novel, though she was a Victorian, she did not write like rest of the Victorians. In other words, she did not talk about the social problems, social issues, the conflict between science and religion, the doubt of Victorian age, the compromise of Victorian age. She doesn't talk about all of this. She only focuses upon the theme of love, the passion, the relationship between Heathcliff and Catherine, and this is it. Right? So she lives in her own world, totally cut off from the Victorian culture and Victorian society. This is how she is a fierce rebel in an age of compromise, in an age of doubt, in an age of conflict between science and religion. So in this way, we can call Emily Bronte a romantic. So this is the last but not the least characteristic of the novel of Emily Bronte, which is revolt against tradition. Next important novelist is Charlotte Bronte, sister to Emily Bronte. Charlotte Bronte, very much like her sister, wrote different kinds of novels that are totally different from the Victorian traditional novel. His best known novels are The Professor, Willet, Jane Eyre, but these are the popular novels. One of the important characteristics of the novels of Charlotte Bronte is autobiographical note or personal note. If you read the novels of Charlotte Bronte, then you will feel that there is a note of her personality, her personal life running through all the novels of her. Particularly her first two novels, The Professor and Willet, they are based upon her personal life, especially disappointment in love. In the novel The Professor, she talks about her failed love with a professor. when she was studying in a college in a university or in a college in Brussels, in Belgium, right? Over there, she fell in love with her ideal. She saw a professor who was a splendid personality, who was a dashing personality, who had a very masculine personality, the qualities that she liked in her ideal. These qualities were there in that professor. When she expressed her feelings to that professor rejected her feeling of love. So then later on she came up with the novel, The Professor, based upon that failure in love with the professor in her real life. So this is one of the important qualities of her novels, that is element of personality or autobiographical element. Next important aspect of her novels is her novels are not the novels of manner. Her novels are the novels of passion and naked soul. Very much like her sister, she talks about not the manners, external life, rather she talks about the soul of her characters. She talks about the passions of her characters. She depicts emotionally intense kind of characters in the world of her novels. So this is one of the important characteristics of her novels, passion and depiction of naked soul. And when she depicts passion and naked soul in the world of her novels, then she also depicts natural backgrounds in the world of her novels. Because passion is something natural and depiction of soul, naked soul, is something natural. So these natural things must be depicted against a natural backdrop, a natural setting. For this, she depicts village life, rural settings, natural settings, elemental settings, and in this way presents nature in the world of her novels. So this is another important aspect of her novels. Next important aspect of her novels is revolt against tradition. Very much like her sister Emily Bronte, she did not discuss the Victorian culture, Victorian problems, Victorian issues, conflict between science and religion, the doubt of Victorian society, the compromise of Victorian society. Rather, she depicts the passion of love, the emotion of love, the naked soul, passionate souls of the lovers and all this. Instead of talking about the Victorian society, she talks about her own, emotional world. Right? So in this way, she contributes towards the Victorian novel. So this is the last but not the least aspect of the novels of Charlotte Bronte. Next important novelist is George Eliot. She was one of the important novelists of the age, and she wrote 4 or 5 novels, and her first important novel is Mill on the Floss. Second is Adam Bede. Number 3 is Romola. Number 5 is Felix Holt. Next is The Middlemarch, and next is Daniel Deronda. So these are some of the novels written by George Eliot. First important characteristic of these novels is philosophical element or thought-provoking element in the world of her novels. If you read the novels of George Eliot, then you'll find that there is a reflective element, there is an element of philosophy in the world of her novels. Her characters are philosophical characters, her characters are reflective characters, which is why some of the critics are of the view that her novels are the novels of characters. Because most of the time she talks about the inside of her characters, not the outside of the characters. While talking about this, one of the critics, David Cecil, he says that we remember the characters of George Eliot not by their appearances, rather by their inside, their psychologies, their mind, their heart and their emotional world, not by what they do in the external world, how they look externally. We do not remember them by their external appearances or by their external behavior. We remember them through their mind, through their emotions, through their psychologies, through their inner self. Right? Why? Because most of the time George Eliot seems to be making effort to focus upon the inside of her characters than the outside of her characters. So this is one of the specialities of the novels of George Eliot. Next important aspect of George Eliot's novels is humor. Humor is definitely there, element of philosophy is there, depth is there in our novels, but humor is also there in order to create the sunshine of smiles and laughters. But remember that it is believed that her humor has a philosophical quality about it, a thought-provoking quality about it, right? A reflective quality about it. Even if there is a humorous situation created by her, she would create it in such a manner that it would force you to think over it. It would be thought-provoking, in other words. It would force you to reflect over certain issues related to real life. So this is another important aspect of her novels, which is reflective kind of humor. Next important aspect of her novels is morality. Morality is always there in the world of her novels, but she shows this morality through the depiction of clash between man and circumstances. In other words, she, in the world of her novels, always depicts her characters in clash with circumstances. As is the case with real life or real human beings. We are always in clash with circumstances, right? We are sometimes in clash with our jobs, sometimes we are in clash with our financial conditions, sometimes we are in clash with our medical conditions, sometimes we are in clash with one type of problem or another type of issue, right? This is true of the characters in the world of the novels of George Eliot. She always depicts her characters in clash with circumstances. So this is another important aspect to her novels, which is morality. In morality, she depicts clash of man and circumstances.